Hey guys, we're going to continue with another lesson. Today we're going to be talking about different types of loops which you can use to execute a block of code multiple times. Um, so there are three types of loops: the for loop, the while loop, and the do while loop. They're pretty similar in how they work, but the syntax is slightly different. So we're going to talk about for loops first. And the way that they work is you type for, and then in these parentheses you have three kind of parameters, and they're separated by two semicolons. So here's where the first parameter goes, here's the second, here's the third. So the way that the parameters are as follows. Initialization, is that right? Yeah, initialization. That seems like a lot of eyes. Okay, so initialization, and then the first semicolon, and what this means is before it even runs the loop one time, it's going to do whatever is here, and that's the only time it's going to do it. Once it finishes doing that, it'll continue acting as normal. Um, Next is a condition, and what this is going to do is it's going to go through this block. So by the way, these for loops, you put a block after them. So what it does is it goes through this block of code, whatever is between these two curly brackets, and then once it finishes that, it goes back up here and it checks the condition. And if the condition is true, then it executes the block again. If the condition is false, then it skips the entire block and goes to the end of the program. The last parameter for the for loop is between this last semicolon and the last parenthesis. And I like to think of this as the iteration action, and then end parenthesis. So what this does is at the end of the loop, before it checks the condition, it does whatever action you put here. So that'll make more sense once you see an example. So let's say that you wanted to output hello world 20 times, but you didn't want to type out cout hello world, cout hello world 20 times. Instead, you can use a for loop to handle this for you. So we're going to make an integer, and we're going to call it counter and set it equal to 0. Or let's set it equal to 1. So that's the initialization. Next comes the condition. I'll set this to counter is less than or equal to 20. And then for our iteration action, I'm going to increment counter. So what this means is it's going to set counter equal to 1, and then execute this block where I'll say hello world. Once it executes that, it'll do the iteration action, which is this right here. So it'll set counter to counter plus 1, and then it'll check this condition, is counter less than or equal to 20? If it is, then it'll say hello world again. But once counter is 21 or greater than 20, then it'll skip this block and just say finished. So let's go ahead and give this a shot. So there we go. We have 20 hello worlds because our loop was executed 20 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 20. So that's how for loops work basically. They are really common to be used for something like this, where you want it to iterate exactly 20 times, or exactly 100. Obviously we could change this number to however many we want, maybe 3,000 or something, you know. It'll go ahead and do it 3,000 times. As you can see, I have these lines and lines, or you can't really see, there are lines and lines of output. So it'll do it as many times as you want for your condition. as long as you're incrementing by 1. If we were incrementing this by like 100, then let's see, it won't do it nearly that many times. I think that's 30 times, because it goes 1, 101, 201, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, blah, 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 until it reaches 29, or almost 30. So I guess it's only 29 times because we're starting at 1, and we set it 3,000. So that's just a look at for loops and their syntax and how you can use them. Next, I'm going to talk about while loops, which are really similar to for loops. They're basically the same, you just don't have this initialization, and you don't have this iteration action. Now that of course doesn't mean that you can't add these in yourself. For instance, we could put our initialization above the loop, and we could write in this iteration action ourselves. And then, we don't need either of these. And basically, we're only checking a condition. So this you could do with a for loop by just leaving these fields blank. However, if you don't want to have these kind of odd-looking semicolons with nothing really pertaining to them, you can use a while loop instead. And then it just takes the condition, so while condition, and then it behaves the same as a for loop. It'll execute this, whatever's here, including this part, and then check this condition. If the condition is false, or if the condition is true, then it'll execute this again. If the condition is false, it won't. So let's do this again, but this time using a while loop. There we go. Execute it exactly 20 times, the same way that our for loop did, except this time we're using a while loop. So it behaves very similar, just the syntax is a little bit different. So now the other type of loop, a do while loop, is very similar to a while loop. But first I'll show you something about this while loop that you might not have realized at first. If I initialize this counter to something like 25, then when we compile and run this, we don't get any output. We don't get any hello worlds, we just say finished. And that's because at the top of this, it checks is counter less than or equal to 25, or 20. And 25 is not less than or equal to 20, so it skips the entire block and just says finished. And it doesn't even say anything once. So that may be what you want, it may be what you don't want.